Section 23 of the American Book of the Dog. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tom Mack, Tucson, Arizona. The American Book of the Dog, G. O. Shields, editor. Section 23, The Beddington Terrier, by W. H. Russell. This dog first emerged from prehistoric obscurity in the county of Northumberland in the extreme north of England. A distinct breed of terrier, native and peculiar to this district, he was known and appreciated there long before the era of dog shows, and since he has become more widely known and carefully bred, he has, with all his improvements, retained the typical characteristics which we find noted in the earliest descriptions of the best specimens, and which mark him off from all other breeds of terriers. The earliest records and traditions we have treat of him as the associate of gypsies, rat catchers, traveling tinkers, and such people, to whom he was a friend and guard, or an ally and companion in sport. However humble his patrons at that time may have been, they were of a class who thoroughly understood terrier sport, hunting with these dogs every animal in the country that wore fur. Mr. W. E. Alcock, the present able secretary of the Beddington Terrier Club, in an article on this breed, states that a famous Northumbrian piper, James Allen by name, who was born about 1720 in a gypsy camp in Rothbury Forest near the center of the county, has left testimony which has been published in his biography to the effect that his father and himself kept rough terriers. The father, William Allen, was much famed for his skill as an otter hunter, and was much in request among the gentry as a man who could always show them good sport. The dogs that Allen used were called Rothbury Terriers, and were the ancestors of the present-day Bedlingtons. Some old fanciers claim that Rothbury is the proper name, and that ought to have been retained. Two of the elder Allen's favorite dogs were Peachum and Pincher, names appearing among later dogs, and we find the name of Piper derived from Piper Allen, born by the first Bedlington Terrier so called. Pedigrees of known dogs of this breed are traced back to 1792 and 1782, but we have no good description of such dogs until those written in the early part of this century. We must remember that 100 years ago terriers were known only as either rough or smooth, and generally speaking we may say that the rough sorts were found where the climate and work were the most trying. They therefore come rightly by a reputation for being a tough, plucky, hard-bitten race, their hard, weather-resisting coats enabling them to withstand the greatest amount of wear and tear, whether on land or in water. Although we do not know as much as we would like to about these early Rothbury Terriers, we do know the strain and its geographical situation. We know the character and physique of the Northumbrian man. He is stalwart and robust, seldom corpulent, is clean, thrifty, and plodding, honest and sincere, shrewd and independent. We find similar characteristics in his dogs, and we may depend upon his appreciation of such animals from the fact that the first of all dog shows was held in the Northumbrian city of Newcastle upon Tyne. This was in 1859. Subsequently, more important shows were held in the larger centers of Great Britain, but anyone looking about Newcastle and its neighborhood cannot fail to notice the keen interest taken in sport on every hand. In 1825, one Thomas Ainsley, a mason who had bred a remarkably good terrier called Young Piper, and from whom many of the best dogs are descended, first gave the breed its present name, after a town some 13 miles north of Newcastle. Its present population is about 14,000, mostly outlying from the original village, which seems to retain its old-time simplicity. We have brief descriptions given in several articles on this terrier of the parents of Young Piper. The sire, Anderson's Piper, was a slender-built dog, 15 inches high and weighing only 15 pounds. He was liver-colored, the hair being of a hard, linty texture ears large, hanging close to the cheek, and slightly feathered at the tips. The dam, which was brought from the town of Beddington in 1820, was black, with brindled legs and with a tuft of light-colored hair on the top of her head. She was 13 inches high and weighed 14 pounds. Thus we can see that 70 years ago at least, some of the important characteristics of the modern Bedlingtons were met with in their progenitors. To be a little fanciful, we may imagine that this breed evolved itself, or was developed in adaptation to its circumstances. The coat is less long and heavy than those of the rough Terriers farther north, and the build is lighter, with more pace for, perhaps, mountainous regions, and longer bursts of speed. In fact, we find the miners of the great coal beds in this district using these Terriers to run rabbits, and seeking pace and therefore long legs in their dogs. When the Bedlingtons were first brought before the public, they were, in the most part, in the hands of these same miners. The demand for speed in coursing had caused the Bedlingtons to be given up in a measure for the Whippet and Greyhound, but he will always be remembered as having been the companion and pride and joy of the Geordie. However, our subject has other fanciers as well, who are more able and ready to show and carefully breed their dogs. 10 years ago, to be sure, the Bedlingtons had been seen and heard out of their home county, but were not much bred elsewhere. Now there are kennels of them all over England, from Devonshire far north into Scotland. The Bedlington Terrier Club has a good list of members well distributed over Great Britain, and with 2 members on this continent. The English Kennel Club Stud Book records prizes given to Bedlingtons at Manchester in 1869, and prize winners are named at the succeeding large shows. On January 1, 1890, a dog show was held at Newcastle upon Tyne, in the same building as the first of all dog shows in 1859. The number of Bedlington entries was 83, the largest known. What crosses helped to produce the Bedlington as we now have him, whether the Otterhound contributed to his pendant ear and peaked skull, and the Greyhound his elegant shape, is not known. Exactly when and how the present type became inherent in the breed, we can only surmise. The underlying quality of the dog, which has in no wise been affected by any possible crossing in the remote past, is Terrier. Everything that can be said in favor of the aboriginal rough Terrier, from which he is descended, may be said of the Bedlington. The 2 names, Ainsley and Pickett, mark eras overlapping each other in history of our subject. There were known previous to 1825 and subsequently many other fanciers, only less prominent as such. Following are the points of the Bedlington Terrier as defined and adopted by the Bedlington Terrier Club. Skull: narrow but deep and rounded, high at occiput, and covered with a nice silky tuft or top knot. Jaw: long, tapering, sharp, and muscular. As little stop as possible between the eyes, so as to form nearly a line from the nose end along the joint of the skull to the occiput. The lips close fitting and no flew. Eyes should be small and well sunk in head. The blues should have a dark eye. The blue and tan ditto, with amber shade. Livers, sandies, etc., a light brown eye. Nose large, well angled. Blues and blue and tans should have black noses. Livers and sandies have flesh colored. Teeth: level or pincer jawed. Ears: moderately large, well forward, flat to the cheek, thinly covered and tipped with fine silky hair. They should be filbert shaped. Legs of moderate length, not wide apart, straight and square set, and with good sized feet, which are rather long. Tail thick at root, tapering to point, slightly feathered on the lower side, 9 inches to 11 inches long, and scimitar shaped. Neck and shoulders: neck long, deep at base, rising well from shoulders, which should be flat. Body: long and well proportioned, flat ribbed and deep, not wide in chest, slightly arched back, well ribbed up, with light quarters. Coat: hard with close bottom, and not lying flat to sides. Color: dark blue, blue and tan, liver, liver and tan, sandy, sandy and tan. Height, about 15 to 16 inches. Weight, dogs about 24 pounds, bitches about 22 pounds. General appearance, he is a light made-up, lathy dog, but not shelly. Pickett preferred the silky top knot to be darker than the rest of the coat, but later fanciers prefer the reverse. The muzzle should be rather narrow, but very deep. There should be no cheekiness, but the strong jaw muscles should be there all the same. The ears should hang low, leaving a clear outline of the head. The position and size of the eyes minimize the chance of damage to these organs. When not trimmed for a show, there is no deficiency on the neck of the protected hair needed by a real working Terrier. Of the various genuine Bedlington colors, the blue-black has been of late years preferred, the livered-colored dogs being but rarely seen at the shows, and the other colors hardly at all. But there is at present a movement in England to bring in the livers again, and they, in fact, were in the old days of the fancy the favorites. Beauty is not usually claimed for Bedlingtons, but if we know how to look for it, I think we may see it on them, for if there is beauty in a Scotch Deerhound, why not in what is nearly like it in miniature? The obstacle to beauty, I should say, is the coat. This has been greatly improved of late, and now it ought not to be either woolly or long. Although hard, the hairs should not be straight, but should stand almost on end, each one separate and distinct, with a twist of its own, as if inclined to curl. Scattered over the body are hairs harder than the rest of the coat, which as a whole should be crisp to the touch, and neither hard nor silky. The coat should be about 1 1/4 inches long, although it is frequently seen as long as 2 inches, which, however, is too long, as it more readily carries dirt, and also conceals the animal's elegant contour. To avoid the latter, the old and long hairs are often removed for show purposes by hard combing and even plucking. How far this is justified will be discussed below. The coat, from 1 1/4 to 1 3/4 inches long, hard, with close bottom and not lying flat to the sides, is certainly an outdoor rural workman's jacket. Flat coats, over 2 inches long on other breeds, may be made ornamental, but the ideal coat of the Bedlington is, to my mind, faultless, all things considered. Hard, it resists wet, and yet it is so short that coming from the water, shaking himself, and rolling on the bank, the dog is quickly dry. My own dogs, with the run of a farm and a neighboring stream, never need washing, and never have to be forbidden any part of the house because of the coat carrying dirt. The feet of any dog on a muddy day will mark a white bedspread, and the tidy American housewife, if there are any dogs about, usually shuts the door to the best parlor. Good specimens of this breed, I speak from personal experience, resemble one another even more mentally than they do physically. There is always the same alert interest in outdoor matters, with the ever-present penchant for hunting and excavating. These energies can, of course, be misdirected, and one's chickens or cats may become the unwilling object of the dog's pursuit, and if not watchful, one may even find the house walls undermined. Young dogs may, however, be easily taught to conduct themselves so as to meet with general approbation, even respecting their owners' flower beds. These dogs are happiest when taken for an outing with their master, searching about at a gallop for anything that runs wild. I have seen a Bedlington stop a large snake and prevent its escape, until, having had his attention attracted, the owner came up and relieved the dog of further responsibility. They readily learn to take to water with delight, and do not heed cold or heat or length of road. In repose and indoors they usually seem dull, not being carpet knights naturally, and their coats may seem awry, not being shaken out as when at liberty. Seen in the snow, of which they are very fond, the coat often looks like a beautiful suit of velvet. They have in good specimens something of the appearance of a thoroughbred racehorse, and when animated show a fiery energy that illumines them. It is this overflowing vitality and sporting instinct in the field that has such a charm for a man who loves what is all about him in nature, as she is found in the field, wood, and stream, and who appreciates a sympathetic canine friend. If the Bedlington is ugly, at least he is not so ugly that after his coat has been cared for, it is considered by his admirers necessary for him to be mutilated before putting on the show bench. The following well-written article, taken from the English St. James Gazette, is interesting as being an apparently unbiased witness, and as showing that some of the best blood has come to this country. The father alluded to is Sentinel, one of the best-headed dogs of his kind. He is described by that unerring judge of the breed, Mr. Charles H. Mason, in his Our Prize Dogs, Volume 1. Sentinel's pluck is testified to in the quotation, "Two tall and burly men were shown into my study some time ago. Their names brought to me memories of wild moorland, of rough sport over bleak salt marshes, but I could not guess their errand. The taller of the pair placed a basket on my table and said with gravity, 'We wanted a trip to London, so we thought we'd fetch him with us. We never trust one of the breed to no railway man.' I then knew that one of the precious strain of Terriers was to be mine, and I received the information with sober joy. Then spoke the broader of my visitors, 'His father's gone to America. We thought you would like a puppy of the old dog's. He was as game as they make them, and we brought you the best for a little present.' The tall man unrolled a sheet that seemed to be dotted with characters that took the shape of a big triangular blotch. There's the pedigree, and nothing better in England." The pedigree was indeed imposing. I found myself the proud possessor of a blue Bedlington. Date of birth, July 18th. Marks, none. In the blood of this aristocrat mingled strains of Old Topsy, Heron's Bess, Piper, Tip, Shields Meg, and the records of these and other breedings wound from the base of the triangle to the apex, where was written the name of that heir of the ages who was in the basket. As the big man reverently laid his hands on the lid, he looked like a bishop about to perform a confirmation ceremony, and then the prize came to view. I am bound to say that a more sorry object never went on four legs. He staggered absurdly, and hung his head as if he were under a sense of crime. His coat, so far from showing a shade of azure, was a mere rugged pelt of dark slate color, and a comic mustache of stiff bristles gave him somewhat the appearance of a barbel. The two giants gazed on the creature, and their look was one of pure rapture. Over 200 miles the brute had been conveyed, and I knew that no higher honor could be offered to me by my good friends, so I resolved to bestow the utmost care on the scion of Topsy. He looked up at me for a moment, and then came to fawn on me in a reserved sort of way. Then I saw the gleam of his deep-set fiery eye, and somehow the impressions given by the whole carcass changed. The ladies of the house came to see my new friend, and their marked restraint increased my misgivings. The poor blue dog crept after them, one after the other, and seemed to crave forgiveness for his own ill-favored guise. But the feminine mind did not relent, and the polite words of commendation were uttered, I fear, as a matter of form. Then a rollicking bull terrier puppy entered and proceeded to play. He rolled the blue over and enjoyed the fun very much, until he took the liberty of bestowing a nip. In an instant the ragged youngster was transformed. Without making a sound, he fixed his grip and held on. The white puppy showed all the gallantry of his race, but he was soon in sore straits, and the tall man said, "Just like the old dog, they're all the same. Better part them." The warriors were lifted up and separated. My vanity was sorely tried during my first public appearance with the blue puppy, but the ugliness wore off week by week. His limbs grew wiry and strong. His tail became so muscular that a tap from it was like the blow of a riding whip, and his head acquired a strange attractiveness. His early youth went pleasantly by, and as his character developed, I found he was quiet and teachable, like all of his breed. His gravity deepened as his beauty became apparent, and even in his gallop over the fields he pounded along as if he were merely running for the good of his constitution and not out of lightheartedness. It is odd to see the dog's pride in his feats with vermin, and I fear that when we go into the country with its swarms of rats, his vanity will become excessive." End quote. There is a consensus among writers on the Beddington that he is of the highest courage, and instances are adduced to show his desperate gameness. It is said when he first became generally known that he was quarrelsome. This has been repeatedly contradicted in print by good authorities. The idea may have arisen from the fact that he was kept by a certain class of men as a fighting dog, and because of his undoubted pluck. However, when not trained by this species of cannibalism, he has been found peaceable when abroad. He has spirit and energy, which are most desirable, but they must be properly educated and directed. A brave man may be either a hero or a desperado. Being a dog capable of the strongest attachment to his master, he is likely to be blindly jealous, and will bear no rival near the throne. At home he will usually not tolerate the intrusion of strange dogs. This can hardly be called a peculiarity of the Beddington, dogs not being inclined as a rule to show hospitality to visitors of their own species. Sometimes in America the proud possessor of a well-bred Beddington may be asked by some earnest inquirer, or perhaps curious and utilitarian scoffer, what is he good for? To a true dog lover, his four-footed friend is something like a child in his affections, whether his usefulness is great or not. But the Beddington can be a necessary part of an establishment. In the first place, he is eminently a man's dog, and although when kept in the house from youth as a pet, he loses his fire and restlessness. If he has had a chance to learn the taste of a sport, he will always be begging his master for a run. He is able to discharge the duties of a larger dog about a country place, except in such instances as require bulk. If his size will not permit him to seize and hold an intruder, he can at least give the alarm, which enables his master to look into the matter for himself, and either supplement or restrain his guard as he may see fit. He has pace enough to keep up with the ordinary speed of a horse, and is small enough to be taken into a vehicle and even given a place on the seat if desired. No rodent, Mephitis america, mink, raccoon, or fox finds the neighborhood of his home a pleasant visiting place. He searches diligently above and below ground for these pests, and when he finds them, shows no quarter. This usefulness, in the writer's experience, living on a forest farm by an Adirondack trout stream. This Terrier will also act as an ordinary farm dog, helping with the cattle. I do not hear of Terriers being used in shooting in this country, but Beddingtons are seen advertised in English papers as broken to the gun. Anyone breeding these dogs should, of course, be careful to have the parents of pure blood. Such are not difficult to procure now in America, and fair specimens may be obtained at modest prices. Selection in mating should be on the general principle of a sum of excellences in the two parents, a defect in one counterbalanced by a corresponding excellence in the other. That is, two animals, both of which are bad in head, body, or legs, or coat, should not be bred together. The tendency in such a case is to an exaggeration of the fault, whereby symmetry is destroyed and failure becomes sure. The more good qualities each parent possesses, the better, and the descent of being from equally good ancestors, the greater the chance of successful results. This principle being so well known, It will be necessary to speak of but one point more, which is especially to be noticed about this breed. The coat should be bred hard. It may be fine, but not soft or silky, except the top knot and ear fringes. Neither should it be coarse or stiff, which indicates other than pure Bedlington breeding. When there is too great a tendency to softness of coat, a liver cross is recommended, and this is one reason why that colored dog should not be neglected. The first Bedlington I ever owned was bought by me in London of a man who kept this breed for hunting rabbits and who cared only for the working qualities, making no note of colors or pedigrees. One day he appeared at my lodgings on his bicycle, followed by 3 of these Terriers, one of which he had caused to be sent from Yorkshire for me. The dog had been taken care of by a gamekeeper, and when I took him to Regent's Park, he ran to right and to left ahead of me, frequently looking back, would be guided by the direction which I waved my hand. When so commanded, he came in to heel, which showed me that he could have been useful with a gun. He afterward, in New York, learned to retrieve, and if a lady dropped her handkerchief, would at a sign from me pick it up and offer it to her. Once I remember a little girl was so surprised by this apparent attention on his part that she said, "Thank you, sir," which made the dog appear very human. However, dogs that are sharp at vermin generally do not retrieve well, and need careful treatment to be taught. They will pick up an article, but nip and drop it, and look for something else. All Terriers should be trained to run ahead and hunt, and to come in to heel when required. If they do not know at least this much, they are likely to be a nuisance. By not punishing a dog when he comes to you, he will learn at a cross word to come to heel, where he can be well controlled and directed. When it is necessary to correct a small dog, run at him suddenly and fiercely. He will usually lie down, then stand over him and scold, but not loudly, perhaps pretending to beat him with a switch. He will then, if he understands, be glad to do as you wish him to do. Never give a command you cannot enforce. Firmness and consistency will train a dog better than to impress him by cruelty, besides developing his intelligence and affection. This is merely the common sense of dog training, which has been ably set forth by well-known writers. These dogs are most hardy. They may be kept where any livestock is kept, provided they have a dry bed, as in a barn in winter, or out of doors in summer. In fact, they are much better if not coddled. They should not be fed much meat unless they have a great deal of exercise. They are usually spare eaters, and ought never to look fat. If a dog is active and his nose is moist and cold, he is doing well. They will be better if allowed great freedom. Much chaining is, of course, bad. Males, if shut up together, are prone to quarrel. As a rule, Bedlingtons will have few diseases if given plenty of air and exercise, with a sufficiency of good food and clean water. It is only when kept confined in numbers that they fall into the hands of the physicians. They may then be treated according to the rules of dogs for their size. To show a Bedlington to advantage, some care is necessary, for he does not display in the ring such animation as he does out of doors at liberty. Therefore, he should be accustomed to the chain and to pleasant associations with it. If made a preliminary to an outing in the fields, he will learn not to consider it an unpleasant bondage, and will not droop as if the chain were used merely for purposes of confinement and punishment. After the first requisites, health and well-developed and hard muscles, comes the coat. The attention which it is customary to give to this before showing is one detriment to the dog's popularity. There are times when the natural coat is such that the dog needs no trimming to look his best. At other times, as the old hairs do not drop simultaneously, and as some remain irregularly here and there over the dog, light in color and long, they should be removed to give him a neat look. This may be done without objection with a fine-tooth comb, but many people think it is fair to remove some hair by plucking. If any mark of such treatment is shown on the skin, disqualification is liable to follow. Honorable handlers will not, of course, cut or alter the color or texture of so much as a single hair. Whatever there is on the dog must be perfectly natural. Some fanciers, on the other hand, consider the least plucking dishonest, and hold that if extensively resorted to, it enables a dog with an excessively long coat to compete advantageously with a naturally good and short-coated dog. This is no doubt true, and presents the problem commented on as follows in the English Stock Keeper, October 18, 1889. Quote, "The disqualifications and severe penalties for trimming that have fallen upon certain kennels again set us thinking of the necessity that exists for laying down clearly the limits of legitimate hair dressing in the rough-coated Terriers. It is fair to remove old hairs and nothing more," is the reply received when old exhibitors are asked for an opinion. But between you and me, and let us substitute our conscience for the lamp post, who is to decide upon the age of the hairs that abound in places which are, in the opinion of the judge, not eligible sites for ground game? Of course, gentle reader, the tiny voice of conscience will be heard in your sensitive ears, ringing like a town crier's bell, and when it softly tinkles in the presence of the deaf, and somewhat deft as well, who will discern the moral slip of the finger and the thumb? We are open to conviction in any direction, but our opinion just now is that the present vague condemnation of the art puts a premium on skilled barbarity. Masters of the art will practice undetected and parade the ring with pride, while the wretched, but no more guilty, initiate with the clumsy marks on his breast, will walk round in the fear of the judge. In the present stage of the matter, we are inclined to describe the Kennel Club Committee's penalties as being rather harsh, but we should be misunderstood if this opinion were construed into an expression of sympathy with the professional trimmers. Our sympathy is with the honorable and eminent members of the kennel world who have boldly entered the lists to unseat the knaves of the tonsure, while our inexpressible contempt is reserved for the champions of trimming, and for those who sneered at the motives of the opponents of trimming." And also January 3, 1890. Quote, "One of the most trying questions during the year that has just begun will be the great trimming puzzle, for it is a puzzle to know how much the Kennel Club or the judges will stand. The Kennel Club ought to solve the puzzle, of course, there is no doubt about that, but the committee fold their hands and shrug their shoulders and say, 'Non possumus,' we have tried. We did issue a circular asking exhibitors for information. The novices and the numbskulls replied most copiously and by return of post, but the rest, who from having been more than 5 minutes in the fancy knew something, proved very bad correspondents. The committee think they have done their best. They are unable to define trimming in Terriers sufficiently just and comprehensive for the purposes of disqualification, so they say we will ask men to judge these hairy breeds who are acquainted with the peculiar customs of the fancy, and then we will ask them to tip us the wink if they see how it has been done. This is a very comfortable temporary arrangement. Some of the judges have taken it to account most seriously, and we expect to give our readers accounts of several causes célèbres of this description in 1890." End quote. The honesty of motive shown here is beyond cavil. Still, as certain modifications of the natural animal are allowed in the case of some other breeds of dogs, there may be another point of view that is not dishonest either. To win with Bedlingtons under the general run of judges, the coat must be made to look neat and not disguise the dog's good points of shape. If any trace of his improvement is found, scrutineers, disregarding the customs of fanciers and judges of this breed, think they have the grounds for disgracing both animal and owner, which does not encourage the taking up of this otherwise unexceptionable dog. If the judges would favor what have been called honest coated dogs, and not be much influenced by the neatness that comes from excessively careful and skillful manipulation, It would tend to stimulate the breeding and showing of dogs with better natural coats. The latest dictum on this subject by the English Beddington Terrier Club is to this effect. At a meeting of the above club, held in Newcastle on January 7, 1880, it was voted unanimously, quote, that trimming Beddington Terriers, that is, removing superfluous hair, be allowable and acknowledged, as it is not done to deceive, but to smarten the dog and show his shape and general contour, and that the Honorable Secretary be instructed to send a copy of the minutes of the meeting to the Kennel Club Committee, and request them to seriously consider the matter. End quote. By this energetic defense of trimming, the Specialty Club openly challenged the highest English tribunal, and the result is that we have the Kennel Club's definition of a limit to the practice. For at a meeting held February 4, 1890, it was, after some discussion, voted unanimously, quote, that the committee of the Kennel Club agree with the Beddington Terrier Club that the removal of superfluous hair is allowable, understanding by the words superfluous hair the old or dead coat. Any removal of the new coat or trimming of the head or ears they consider improper tampering. End quote. With this decision, it is believed that Beddington men in general will be satisfied, but few Beddingtons have been shown in the United States as yet, and they have been mostly imported specimens. If they were shown in larger numbers, so that the type could be more readily seen and appreciated, it would greatly help them in popularity. Now, in the poorly filled classes, they look like survivors of a nearly extinct race. They are not understood. However, there are opportunities afforded each year of showing under excellent judges. New faces appear from time to time on the show benches, and testify to an appreciation among some few. If these dogs ever get a favorable start, I do not see why they may not become favorites in certain parts of the United States. They are especially adapted to our rigorous northern climate. They care so little for the luxuries of life that they thrive where some other dogs would not. So far, they have found the most favor in Canada. One of their best known advocates in that country is Mr. W. S. Jackson of Toronto, and the Blue Dogs may be proud of their friend, as people who have had the pleasure of meeting him will understand. There is good Beddington blood in British America, as far west as Victoria, Vancouver's Island, and as far east as Halifax, Nova Scotia. In the United States, it is scattered about north of the Mason and Dixon's line. End of chapter 23. Recording by Tom Mack.